Yes, yeah. This is so cool. Okay, sorry, I had to get that out of my system. This is my Twinmotion tutorial series. We're going to call this video 0 because we've made it through 5 videos, and then I realized I just don't like the way things are working in Twinmotion, and I had to stop and fix them. So if you haven't noticed from my little screaming and yelling jaunt there, I've found a way to really fly around Twinmotion with ease. I can get to anywhere in this map just really easily and quickly, and it's just awesome. And it took a little bit of effort to set it up, and it's not for the faint of heart. You have to kind of be willing to persevere, if you will. Because not everybody's going to want the same setup as I've got set up here, but I tell you what, once you've got it set up, it's just going to bring you joy. So let's get into it. I'll tell you what I'm doing right now. I'm going left to right on an Xbox controller with a left thumbstick. Now I'm going to hold the trigger and go left to right, and you're going to see the speed at which I'm panning has increased. Same thing, I'm going to hold my middle mouse and pan around. Now I'm going to pull that left trigger, hold my middle mouse, and pan around. Look at that. What I've done is I've remapped an Xbox controller using this software right now, and I am on the trial license. I am definitely going to buy this. It's well worth the $10 promotional cost, dated today, 4/21/2020. So it's called ReWASD. 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 We're on the trial license. And so what I've done is I've essentially, Twinmotion has some capabilities built into it for the Xbox controller. I didn't like those capabilities. I didn't want to have to use my Xbox controller in lieu of the mouse. I wanted to use it alongside so that I could do some of this advanced kind of panning and motion all in one fluid movement while, moving my mouse, and then on top of that, moving my joystick. So what I did was very simple, but let's get into how you do what I did in case you want to do it a little bit different. First up, you're going to get a screen, and it's going to show this Xbox controller icon amongst any other peripherals you might have connected. Keep in mind, ReWASD will actually, you can remap other devices that you have connected as well. And if you look into the literature, it'll tell you how to do that. But I'm going to focus on just the Xbox controller. And so what I did specifically is I hit this plus icon up here, and what that does is adds a new config or configuration. And then it brought up all of these, mapping indicators. And so the next part of this is that if I go to this icon right here, this hover over, if I hover over, it shows me this is the gamepad back buttons. And what I did was I mapped this button to the left shift. So as I hover over this section of the icon where my button resides, it highlights it. Once I left mouse click, this is on a PC, mind you, it gives me this dialog right here. What this dialog is showing me is this is my possible mappings right here, my ReWASD mapping. And I've got the availability of doing keyboard shortcuts, mouse shortcuts, command line things. As you select these, they become available in this drop down. So when I click this drop down, I've got a bunch of keyboard shortcuts, I've got mouse buttons that I can click, and I've got Xbox buttons that I can remap from. So all I did was I made sure I ensured that the keyboard icon was highlighted, and then I changed this to a left shift. Simple as this. I hit the drop down. If I hit the drop down and I type 5, for instance, there you go, it maps to 5. I'm going to hit left shift, and I'm just going to click anywhere off of that menu item, and now I have successfully mapped this to this config, but not applied yet. I need to click apply to apply it to my Xbox controller. It's going to do a little updating, and there you go. It's saved it. Now let's go back to the front side of this controller. there's only a couple other things I did, and that is that I mapped these D-pads. This D-pad is mapped to the number 3, 4, 5, 6. I wanted that 4, which is the move command in Twinmotion, 5, which is the rotation command in Twinmotion, and 6 being the scale command. And one other command that I might take an interest in is pressing down on this key right here. I might bind that to something particular in Twinmotion. I haven't come up with it yet. But this effectively takes care of my left hand. Oh, I could also remap the left bumper to something that might be of interest to me. At the moment, I haven't figured out what that is, so I'm going to hit apply. So now when I'm back in Twinmotion, my left joystick does pan left to right, and if I'm going up and down on my left joystick, this is, scrolling in and scrolling out, zooming in or zooming out, if you will. If I hold the shift button, all that does is increase the movement speed bound to this particular parameter. There are 3 parameters in Twinmotion, 1, 2, and 3, which correspond to 1, 2, and 3 on your keyboard. 1 being a walk speed. So if I click walk speed, which is the number 1 key on my keyboard, you're going to see as I move, it's moving at a snail's pace. I'm moving my joystick on my Xbox controller at full directional tilt on the axis, and that's my move speed. If I click my left trigger, which is that shift button, that move speed increases, who knows, by a factor of something. Now, if I hit 2 on my keyboard, here's bicycle speed. It's a little bit faster than walk speed. If I hold that shift button down, that left trigger, we're getting even a little bit faster. This is probably good enough for most. Now we're going to get into that ultra speed, right? That car speed, number 3 on the keyboard. This is what it defaults to. If I hold shift, we're really flying around. You could see how this could be pretty fun for navigating a very large scene. And I think there is something to be said for the size of the scene and how these there's some kind of exponential scale to all of this, because I get a much faster movement, and maybe it's all relative to perspective. I'm in tighter to this geometry, so it seems a lot faster than when I get out here farther out. It actually doesn't seem like ultra speed anymore. It's still moving at a regular clip. And then I could use my middle mouse to pan around, or if I hold that trigger, that activates that grab and pan motion, which I have my mine set up to default to the SketchUp style of navigation. So there we go. That's the first part of this video, and this video is just going over a couple of, I want to call them Twinmotion hacks, because that's such a fun word. We're hacking the system to get it to do what we want it to do. So check the description. I'm going to drop a link to this software, and thank you so much to this developer. I know I've already got this in the cart. You can see this is some kind of promotional deal here, and I think this is an awesome tool. So next part of this video, and we've got another tab open right here, is this link shell extension. And if you're not familiar with shell extensions, and this is specific to Windows, and this shell extension handles creating symbolic links or junctions or hard links. If you're unfamiliar, do a little bit of research. There's a lot of information on this particular website that explain all of these various junctions and links and symbolic links. Mac users, you have this same option. It's not from this particular vendor, but you have your own options to create symbolic links. I can't remember if that's actually what it's called on Mac, but it's an easy Google search term. Just Google Mac symbolic link. And so what we're going to do with a symbolic link, I'm glad you asked. Let's get back into Twinmotion. What I'm showing you right now is, in our edit, under preferences, under our custom paths, we can set a user library, user folder, anywhere we'd like. Now, that's a fantastic feature. By default, it lives in documents, and it lives under the heading Twinmotion 2020. And here it is, user library. Now, if I don't highlight this user library and I just select this folder, which means that I'm essentially selecting the Twinmotion folder right here. There we go. If I select that folder, now that's where my user library exists. And I have some items in that user library. This was my default folder path. Now, what I'm going to do next is that I'm going to set up a user library to be the way that I want my user library. And that is that I already have two folders that are just commonplace in my structure, my folder structure, and they're synced to the cloud. That is materials and models. I access these so much that they need a very special place in my Windows Explorer, front and center, because that's how often I go to these two folders. And these folders handle all material files and all model files across all of the various 3D CGI softwares that I use. And it's very important to me that they all exist here and that all programs that I use have the capabilities of pointing to these particular folders. And in my models folder, for instance, if I go to trees, plants, landscaping, we're going to see, let's just take a look at a couple different ones here. Some of these I've been updating to a new convention that I want to use, and that is a very specific convention. Let me see if I can find an example of this. Flooring, for instance. I have my base diffuse map. If you're unfamiliar with a diffuse map, I'd tell you to go take a look and look it up. My base diffuse map, so I can easily pick out a texture that I want, and then a coinciding folder that sources all of the normal maps, bump maps, roughness maps, metal maps, clipping masks, displacement maps, all of the backup files to the base diffuse map so that I know where to find them. They're named the same as the diffuse map that's in the root folder, and I can go find all that corresponding maps that can make my materials pop off the page. Same thing in my models folder. I have particular, let's see here. Let's see if I've got a hierarchy that's already built out. Doesn't seem that I do. I do in fact have one, and I think it's in. No, I don't. So what I would do here is I'm going to create a couple sort items here. One is I'm going to sort by type. And then, excuse me, I'm going to group by type. I'm going to group by type, and then I'm going to sort by name. And then I'm going to sort by name ascending, yes. Here we go. And I'm actually going to group by descending. There we go. This brings all of my textures up to the top of the list and the folders down at the bottom. What's going to happen here is as I create Twinmotion materials and models, they're going to live in its own subgrouping in Twinmotion, so that when I'm in the Twinmotion software, it's very easy for me to go look up the root files because they'll be organized by a file type .tm, much like the SketchUp is .skp, or chief architect file .calibs, or a Thea file modthea, etc. So I can keep all these various 3D softwares files in the same folders with the same names if they're the same particular model, and be able to find these really fast, and all the assets. You can see here I've already imported something into Twinmotion. That was a SketchUp file, and it's created an extracted textures folder, and I'm not bothered by that because of the way this is organized. So there we go. So now that I have my materials and models folders and they live across all these different 3D programs, how do I get them into Twinmotion with Twinmotion's naming convention? Well, I could drop materials and models folder in the Twinmotion folder called user library, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to give Twinmotion that much control. So instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a symbolic link. So because I installed that shell extension, when I right click on my materials folder, I get this option in my dropdown. Pick link source. What I'm telling that shell extension to do is create a symbolic link to that material. I'm not saying that yet. I'm actually just picking this folder, and it's holding that in the shell extension's cache, if you will. You guys that are computer experts, correct me if I'm wrong there. So I'm going to pick link source. The next thing I'm going to do, I've got a folder open. Let's see here. Let's grab another folder. There we go. I'm going to get back. I've made a custom folder on a very fast hard drive, my C drive. And I'm probably going to pick a different way to organize this, but for the purpose of this video, here we go. Twinmotion user library. Folder's empty. Here we go. I'm going to right click, and here again this is from that shell extension. I could cancel that link creation, which is clearing that cache, getting rid of that from its memory, or I can drop as. And here are the various links that I can use. I'm going to drop as a symbolic link. Windows is going to ask me for administrative privileges, and there we go. And we get this little icon here, which is like that shortcut icon that we've seen. If I click on this materials, it's going to send me to an exact replica of what we see here. It's the same folder structure. But what it's doing is it's actually linked back to this file, so that if I go into my root materials and say I right click in here and I say, we're going to create a new folder, if you will, and we're going to call it test. Look what happens on that root cloud synced materials folder. We now have this folder called test. We created it over here, and it lives over here. Well, hey, take a look. OneDrive materials. That's because we're in the OneDrive materials folder. How is that possible? If I go back a level and back another level again, there we go. Symbolic Link. We're in our Twinmotion user library, and somehow we've created this test folder and it's synced up. Same way, if I get over here in my OneDrive materials located folder, sync to the cloud, and I delete test, it disappeared from our Twinmotion user library. This is fantastic news. So next part of this, since we're here, I'm going to get it back into OneDrive. I'm going to pick this models as a symbolic link, pick link source, and I'm going to drop this over here. Drop as symbolic link. Now I'll tell you, because this was a big question on my mind, if I delete these folders, which are symbolic links, does it delete my root folder and I lose it from OneDrive and just cry myself to sleep? No, I can delete these and it won't in fact delete from OneDrive. Again, take a look at what a symbolic link is, study up on it before you're comfortable using it. This is kind of an advanced thing we're doing. So the last bit of this is I'm now going to specify my user library under preferences to that new folder. Custom paths. Here we go. Going to get down to that C drive and get into that Twinmotion folder. I've selected it. Select that folder, and let's take a look at what happened. Boom. Look at this. Isn't this fantastic? Now I've got my material folders just the way I like them. As I organize this, this will get organized in Twinmotion as well. If I organize it in Windows Explorer, it's going to get organized in Twinmotion. That's fantastic. We're all synced up. Now that we have this all set up, let's just take a look and do a couple of little small tests. One of those tests is that I'm going to go to my documents folder and get down to that Twinmotion folder and take a look at my user library. And I've got something in particular that I love to save. This Pathlights folder. I saved the Pathlight in the Twinmotion. Let's see, if we open up Pathlights, we're going to see it. That TMI is that Twinmotion file. It's Pathlights. Let me get into my models, and under lighting, let me just drag in this Pathlights folder because I like that model. Okay, let's close these folders out, and we'll see if without a refresh that actually brought it into our lighting folder. Look at that, Pathlights. The only issue here is it seems that the actual root file is not there, although, interesting. So I might need to refresh. I might need to even get out of the program itself and get back in it to see this. In fact, let's do that. We're going to close it down, and we'll do a little video cut. Okay, we've opened up back into Twinmotion. Let's get to that lighting, path lights. There it is. We just cut for the video for just 1 second, but here is our modern path light. I dragged that in Windows Explorer into the location of where my Twinmotion folder, user folder exists. So long story short, we've got a really dynamic way of syncing materials and models across all of our 3D programs and having one folder structure that works for all of your various programs you might be working in. And of course, we've got that awesome super speed navigation. Love that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I might add to this video as I find more tips and tricks for Twinmotion and re-upload. This is always going to be Twinmotion video 0 in the in our playlist. And as usual, please hit subscribe.